are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joined with me remotely is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man, so continuing on with our coverage heading into the 2021 NBA playoffs, we wanted to talk about, a topic that has been a big topic of discussion in recent times, especially when a certain big-time player, kind of mentioned that the guy who came up with it should get fired. And
I mean, honestly, it's been a topic of conversation for a while now, even previously in the season, and honestly, even since last season when they introduced it.
Yeah. So, and if you don't already know, we're talking about the NBA play-in tournament. So we wanted to take this opportunity to kind of break down exactly what is the NBA play-in tournament, the pros and cons of why the NBA is actually doing this, and then, jumping into the landscape of the play-in tournament, kind of seeing what teams are in the mix, what teams could potentially be in this tournament, and how it impacts teams in different ways. So we wanted to break those down for you in this episode. But to start off, we wanted to explain exactly what the play-in tournament actually is for those of you who don't remember, don't care, or may not, or would just like to know. So basically, it's a single elimination tournament between the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th seeds in the in each respective conference. And basically, it's to determine the 7th and 8th seeds for the playoffs. In the case of the play-in tournament, the 7th seed plays the 8th seed, the 9th seed plays the 10th seed, and basically the winner of the 7 and 8 seed becomes the 7th seed. And then the winner of the 9-10 seed will play the loser of the 7-8 seed to become the 8th seed. So whichever team wins that will become the 8th seed. And honestly speaking, the NBA really came up with this from what they did last year with the bubble, kind of introducing that style, that single game elimination kind of thing. And I'm not gonna lie, there were some positives to take away from the play-in tournament. The first of which, it's because of the pandemic. It's probably the biggest reason for the NBA. It's
for sure.
It's more revenue. The NBA needs more money. They're looking to, like every business, they're looking to recoup the damages that happened because of COVID. So obviously, the play-in tournament, it drives revenue. It gets recognition. Just the excitement of, holy shit, my team who's sitting at the 8th spot could potentially be out of the playoffs now, is pretty, the excitement that it drives up, which is another positive, generates more revenue for the NBA. The NBA is able to sell that to networks. So that's obviously a big playing factor and again, more revenue for the league means more money for players for contract negotiations. So that's always a great positive by this play-in tournament. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Like as we were talking about, right? It's a chain of the NBA being able to recoup that money, which will go to the players, to the staff, everyone involved. And if you guys remember too, like there's that report of the NBA lost like $1 billion or something. So yeah, they clearly need some more money. And this is probably one of their biggest ways to make some of that money back.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing that the NBA is really trying to accomplish with the play-in tournament is to mitigate teams from tanking for lower seeds. Because obviously now with the play-in incorporating the 9th and 10th seeds, teams in those positions have a less incentive to tank because now they're like, hey, we have a shot to get our team in the playoffs. So this, in theory, creates more opportunity for younger and less star-filled teams to kind of get a chance to play in the playoffs, which it could be a big deal for a young team or small market franchise as well.
Yeah, so this was like, I guess, the other main factor of the NBA creating this play-in tournament. Now, if you guys remember, like the NBA has been cracking down on tanking ever since Sam Hinkie literally just said it outright that Philadelphia was tanking completely. Adam Silver has made it a point to try to mitigate this issue within the league. For example, creating more even odds in the draft lottery so that teams who are terrible are not guaranteed a top pick, right? AKA the New York Knicks was it last year or a couple years ago, whatever it was. So like that was another big factor of the NBA creating this play-in tournament. Now moving on to you want to say something?
No, I'm good, yo.
Yeah, okay, so moving on to the cons of the play-in tournament. Now, first of all, I think I have to reiterate that the playing tournament was widely accepted last year because of the fact that the season itself was cut short, right? And that was the main reason why it was so widely accepted and why people didn't really have a problem as much with this playing tournament, because it was like, there was a number of games left in the season. How are we going to balance that with whoever's already guaranteed to make the playoffs? And so the NBA created the playing tournament. This season, that's not the case, right? This season is almost a full season, right? There's no games that have been canceled completely. So the NBA and the playing tournament itself has not had the same support this year. And one of the reasons why, and arguably the biggest reason why, is the fact that it ruins the point of working all year for a seventh or eighth seed. And this is something that Luka Doncic touched upon a couple of weeks ago, which we even talked about. It ruins the just the whole objective of working all year for a seventh and eighth seed. Now you can say, oh yeah, if you're a seventh or eighth seed, you deserve to be in the playing tournament because of the fact that you're a fringe playoff team, you're not that good. But that's an argument in the Eastern Conference, I guess. In the Western Conference, that's not a real argument. We're looking at we're gonna touch upon it, but looking at the seventh and eighth seeds right now in the Western Conference, like you can't say they suck as a team, right? Those teams,
Yeah.
you can't say they suck. So having them as a seventh or eighth seed, working all this long, working throughout the season for the seventh and eighth seed, and have the potential to just get booted out in 2 games it kind of ruins the point of that.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest sour points of the play-in that I really felt about was that, you know, for instance, if my favorite team, I wish they were in the seventh spot, but if they were in the seventh,
I don't.
I mean that's a topic for another day. But if they were in a playoff position, a seventh or eighth seed, which is typically a playoff position in previous seasons, why should they be punished and have to participate in a play-in tournament that potentially will make it so that they lose? We're going to talk about teams that are on certain hot streaks that, because of the timing of the play-in tournament, could win 2 games and now they're in a playoff spot. So it really just diminishes the work that a team does. And again, I know, the imbalance of power in the NBA, the imbalance of star power is always going to be an issue. But at the same time, is that it's you gotta this league's about wins and losses. So if a team wins more than another team, they deserve to be in a playoff position. Just kind of how it works.
I think based off of that point too, I think the NBA already had a problem with people relaxing during the regular season, and the regular season suffering from rating drops because of the fact that people just don't take the regular season that serious anymore. And I think this will just add on to it, right? Because of the fact that, like, now it just creates, and this is my next point, it creates, it allows more undeserving teams to get into the playoffs. Now you theoretically have 10 teams in playoff contention rather than the 8 that already was, which people already argued was a bit too much, right? If you look at the NFL situation, NFL actually has gone into more of the NBA's direction now. But, people already argued that having 16 out of 30 teams in the NBA playoffs was already too much. Now that's theoretically like 20 teams vying for a real playoff spot. And so an undeserving team, for example, a team that either coasted throughout the regular season and did not care, just wanted to get into the playoffs, or a team that was complete garbage in the regular season, but somehow managed to sneak into that 10th seed and somehow win 2 games in the play-in tournament and boot out, the more deserving 8th or 7th seed. So this is another point that I think can be argued against the use of the play-in tournament.
Yeah, no, I think you said it best. I mean, like, it really, it's such a fine line that the NBA is kind of walking on. And like you said, like, you can argue the 1-8, the 2-7 matchup is probably the most garbage matchups that we see in the playoffs, especially in the Eastern Conference. It's just because, again, the talent level is just not there and again, potentially if you're getting what should have been a 10th seed now in that position of the 8th seed, that's going to make an even worse product on the court as well. So again, like, it's like you said it, like, it's basically like 20 teams now have a shot at making it to the playoffs, which sounds great for a league that wants to encourage teams to be more competitive, but at the same time, it's not really gaining anything as far as putting on a better product unless you have a balance of power where every team, like it's like the NFL, for instance, where every team has a pretty even shot at beating them on any given night.
Yeah, I think you nailed it pretty much, right? In with the NBA versus NFL comparison, where they're going towards the NBA's, like direction more. But to your point, the NFL actually has a competitive balance between pretty much all the teams, right? The NBA unfortunately does not have that pro for them. They have a very uncompetitive league driven by star power. Another factor that goes into the cons of the playing tournament is that there's more schedule condensing. Brandon Clark recently talked about it on the score that they're already playing a hectic 72 game schedule. Pretty much everyone's been injured this season. Everyone's had COVID. Everyone's just been in and out. And this has just been a season from hell for everyone. And now you're condensing the schedule even further. And especially if you go into next season with this playing tournament where players are already sitting out because they didn't want to play 82 games. And then now you're throwing in more games on top of that. And Hani was even talking about it with me before we started this episode. The fact that it's gonna push the playoffs and the regular season so close together that it's very hard for teams to find that time to rest, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, again, this season might be an anomaly because again of how things kind of transpired in the league calendar. But I think at the same time, the league, if this is going to be a reoccurring thing, which to be honest with you, I hope it doesn't. The NBA is going to have to rework the whole schedule because you cannot expect the players to play 82 games, then expect another 4 or 5 teams to play another 2 games potentially on that schedule. That's 84 games, so that's unfair to the other teams only playing 82. So something is going to have to be reworked in that manner to make it so that everyone's playing the same amount of games. But again, I don't know of a way to do that, logistically at least. And the NBA has made it pretty clear they don't want to reduce the amount of games because they lose money doing that. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's a fine line the NBA is walking. And two more final points about the cons of the playing tournament. Number one, I think me just being I guess a hoop head in terms of like a basketball historian, I think it hits me more than I guess the regular fan would. But it kind of messes up the leaderboards and records, all time records wise. Now again, it probably won't do too much, but 2 games at a time over a number of years kind of adds up. And again, like these things will happen because of rule changes and whatnot. The 3-point line, for example, messed up a bunch of records, right? You can argue, but I don't know, for me as a basketball historian, it doesn't sit completely right with me. And then one other point that Hani brought up was the fact that it kind of messes up lottery odds and draft predictions for the teams involved. So, if you're clearly, if you want to get a top 10 pick or whatever, now it's just like the playing tournament just throws a monkey wrench into everything.
yeah, like as far as the leaderboard and records, like it's gonna be weird. Like just like when they first added the 3-point shot, it's like, well, now some players are gonna play 2 extra games, and some players are gonna have an opportunity to get more points and more assists, and it's just weird. I don't know how beneficial it will be, and again, the lottery odds is another thing because again, you know, the only picks that I know for sure based on the odds that are very solidified is maybe 1 through 5, if that. Anything past that, you really got to throw your arms up. And you got to be like, who knows where they're gonna land? Like you can be 7th or you can be 14th. Now I believe there is a contingency for that. Like the NBA has put it so that the way the standings are before the play-in is where you get your draft pick, which also doesn't make any sense. So you can make the playoffs.
Wait, what? Really?
There's something I read.
Nah,
Apparently,
that's dumb, bro.
no, but
If that's actually the case,
but
that's
take
pretty
it in.
stupid.
Like that's what some teams would argue. I think like that's why I don't understand it because again, it doesn't make sense. Why would a team who finished 10th gets the 10th best odds of making it, getting a lottery pick, and then on top of that makes the playoffs. It just I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't know what's the NBA's official ruling on this because we haven't gotten any update on that. But that
I mean,
yeah.
flipping it to the opposite point of view, imagine that you work all year for that 8th or 7th seed, you get booted out of the playoffs, and now you still have worse odds at a draft pick,
Yeah.
right? That's pretty stupid, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think the main point is I think we can both. It's pretty obvious, but do you like the idea of a playing tournament?
Personally, no. I don't see the point of it. Yes, is it exciting? Will it create some buzz in the NBA? To get teams in. Sure, but I think holistically, when you're looking at it, like I don't want to see a 10 seed potentially make it to the playoffs. Like they're a 10 seed for a reason. Like even now, like our team, the Raptors, are the 11th seed right now in the Eastern Conference, and we're kind of like, do we really want to see them get to the play-in tournament when they get slapped in the first round? Like, is that really beneficial, or could we rather, just take our chances and get a lottery pick and kind of have the offseason to rest and recover, and then come back next year and let's do it again? I personally think
Pretty
that,
much.
like, I personally think that's the better way to go. But again, it could just also be that it's just kind of the way things have been, and it's been a little bit more traditional that way for me. But
Yeah, I guess the traditional sense does play a factor into our decision of not liking it. But I don't know, man. Just based off of everything that we touched upon, I would say, man, like I personally don't like the idea of a playing tournament. If you want to make the regular season more interesting, I think there has to be another way to do it. I don't think the playing tournament is it, to be honest.
it's just not worth it, to be honest with you, and it's just not worth the extra investment that the NBA is trying to put into it. Like there's better ways to go about like mitigating tanking or generating more revenue. So yeah, so those were our thoughts on the actual like the format of the play-in tournament and kind of the pros and cons of it. Let's jump into the landscape now of how the play-in tournament is actually affecting some teams heading into the playoffs. So first we'll start off with the Eastern Conference. So first, I'll run down the seeding as far as right now. What's the seeding? So the current 6th seed in the Eastern Conference is the Miami Heat. Current 7th seed, the Boston Celtics. Current 8th, Charlotte. Current 9th seed, Indiana. And current 10th seed, the Washington Wizards. So the reason why we threw in the 6th seeded Miami Heat is because they could potentially be very impacted by this play-in tournament. Now, Miami has had a pretty up and down year in terms of their record. But there's one thing for sure is that when healthy, they have shown they are one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference because of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, the young players, Goran Dragic. The Miami Heat have talent on their team, but again, the record doesn't really speak to that. They're half a game above the Boston Celtics, who are the 7th seed, which means they're very close to potentially playing in this play-in tournament. Even though again they have clearly the better talent, the better roster, and their team got plagued with COVID and injuries that, that's why their record isn't that great. Like at the beginning of the year, Miami was playing with like a G League squad or something.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So again, and then you saw when Jimmy Butler and Bam came back, like they had the roster back. They got to like the 4th seed or something like that, and I think injuries kind of came back to bite them again. But otherwise, I mean, they're clearly better than any other team in the East play-in tournament. Like.
Oh, besides Boston.
Maybe besides Boston. You know what? Let me actually talk about Boston too, because they're in a very similar situation to Miami. Where when healthy, again, they're one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Like behind Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, it's Boston and Miami. Like that's what it should have been. Which, by the way, screwed up our predictions. Predictions big time.
Dude, our predictions are gone, bro. That was gone in the first week, bro. After that, never recovered, man.
Listen, man. Freaking New York screwed everything up.
Yo, you and your hate train against New York, bro.
Bro, it's not hate, it's real. But yeah, back to the Boston Celtics, another team who I definitely hate. But
I got you there.
But
I'm cool with that.
If we gotta be real, they are a very good team. And again, when healthy, they should be a playoff team. However, again, they got hit with COVID, especially with their best player, Jason Tatum. We see what Jason Tatum can do. The man just dropped 60 points.
Crazy.
Yeah, he's crazy, insane. And Kemba was hurt. So again, the Celtics, and they're a 7th seed right now. So, I personally think for these two teams in particular, it's just kind of not fair that they have to play in this play-in tournament when they're clearly better than the rest of the play-in, the rest of the guys in this play-in. But what say you about these guys?
Yeah, man, this is why pretty much the Western Conference playoff race or play-in tournament race, I guess, is much better than the Eastern Conference because of the fact that you have two legitimate teams in the Eastern Conference play-in picture, I guess. and then after that, it's kind of not great. We'll talk about those teams after this, but the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics, to your point, are in two very similar situations in the sense that both got hit with COVID and both have been pretty much injured throughout the year and have just been up and down throughout the year, right? And both teams have kind of also been disappointing when they've had full rosters. Again, that has to do a lot with the lack of time, like the rosters actually spent together.
Also, the
So,
effects of COVID, the lingering effects of COVID, also is a
yeah,
big
even
deal.
for us, like watching a guy like for us, watching our favorite team, the Raptors, watching a guy like Fred VanVleet struggle mightily with, coming back from COVID. He's kind of turned the corner from that, but it's definitely very real, and it definitely plays a big factor into these teams. And so having these two teams who are clearly, Eastern Conference contenders, um play in this playing tournament, and potentially one or even both of them, because it's two games, right? One or two games, you never know what could happen. Either one or both of them, being booted out of the East playoff race is just gonna tank completely the NBA's ratings, right? Especially for the Eastern Conference, which was already suffering post LeBron, right?
Yeah.
So, having these two teams with the potential to get, kicked out of the playoffs is not great for the NBA at all.
Yeah, it's not. And again, when you're talking about a team who probably doesn't deserve to be in the playoffs, I want to bring up another team in the East play-in who could be potentially impacted by this play-in tournament being existing is Washington. Washington has been on a hot streak as of late. I mean, what is it? Scott Brooks is one coach of the month. Man, he went 12-5 in
Yeah.
April. Like
Dude,
it's
I think this guy's job is safe, unfortunately,
bro.
bro.
I don't know how. Like
My prediction might have been busted for Scott Brooks.
like the Wizards were garbage to start the season. Absolutely horrendously garbage. And they're still not a good team. They didn't do anything. Like they didn't really do anything at the trade deadline besides maybe get Daniel Gafford and
Who's been great?
who. I mean,
Shout out Daniel Gafford. He's been really good.
he's
For them.
been good for them. Again, they really needed a center because they lost Thomas Bryant. And again, they do have Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook, who we did talk about a couple of episodes ago. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely check it out. Who, again, we said the Wizards could be a potential dark horse playoff team if they did make it to the playoffs. And this is kind of the reason why. Like, you're seeing the crazy numbers that Russell Westbrook is putting up right now, and this is what he's capable of doing. And when he's motivated, if he has a chance to get into the playoffs, I think Westbrook and Bradley Beal are going to take it. But the problem is, and I mentioned it, they were garbage for the whole season, except until the month of April. And it's a little unfair that because they got hot at the right time, that should automatically erase what happened at the beginning of the year. No. Like, I think it's great for them, for the Wizards and their fans, that hey, they have a chance to get to the playoffs. It's some positivity in what's been a pretty shitty year for them in general. But why should that take away the opportunity from teams like Boston and Miami who have earned their right to be in the positions that they are in? Like, it's not like Washington's in a position like that Charlotte's in where it's like, yeah, it's no big deal. They make the playoffs, they make it. If they don't, they don't. It's been a good year for them. Or even like Indiana. Indiana, they've had a lot of rough stretches this season, and again, they don't really deserve to make it to the playoffs. So they pretty much accepted their fate. But Washington, the way they're playing is that they're trying to get into the playoffs, and I just think it shouldn't be that way that they take away an opportunity from teams that clearly deserve it more.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what the NBA envisioned when creating the play-in tournament. A team like the Washington Wizards, who, despite the fact that they were garbage pretty much for the whole season, and now that they're the 10th seed, they have enough talent on the roster to be an Eastern Conference dark horse team, as we mentioned a couple episodes ago, because of the fact that after the first five teams in the Eastern Conference, Brooklyn, Miami, Boston, Milwaukee, who's the last team?
Philly.
Philly, right? Besides those five teams, no other Eastern Conference team has a duo like Washington has. And now, despite the fact that they were garbage throughout the whole season, I would say I think they're gonna make the playoffs just because of how hot they are right now, and because of the fact that they have a more capable duo than any other team right now in the play-in tournament, except for Boston, obviously.
I can see them beating
So
Charlotte. Like, I can see Washington beating Charlotte and beating Indiana, honestly. Yeah, So yeah, you're right. They have a great shot at making it to the playoffs, but again,
Exactly, and that's my point, right? And fans of Charlotte, especially because the Indiana Pacers have kind of just been decimated with injuries, and it's not really been a great year for them. I think they would rather just take a draft pick right now. It's just been complete all around garbage show for them. But the Charlotte Hornets, man, like their fans have been starving for some excitement in that city for a while. And now that they actually got a young, exciting roster that's making headlines all day, that can make headlines in the NBA playoffs and can give the Charlotte Hornets fans like some hope for the future and for the present, being booted out in the fashion that they could be booted out by a team like the Washington Wizards will definitely not sit right with Charlotte fans, especially, I think.
I mean, it's one way to look at it, but at the same time, for a team like Charlotte, they're more so like excited that they have a good team, like a young team that they can build on. They don't make if they miss out on the playoffs, it's not going to be the end of the world for them. But I think
I think
if a team
I,
like Boston misses out, then yeah, for sure, your point is very valid.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a big deal if they miss the playoffs, but I think my point is more so like the way they would miss the playoffs
Yeah,
in this format, right? I think that would not sit well. Obviously if they got like the ninth or 10th seed regular, in any other season they would be cool with it. But to get the eighth seed after working so hard and having this much excitement around the team and then just being kicked out in what one or two games or whatever it is, I don't think it'll be great I don't think Charlotte fans will be too happy about that.
yeah,
But that was the Eastern Conference, and the landscape of the playing tournament in the East. Moving things over to the Western Conference, where it's very, very, very interesting. Pretty much 5 to 11. If we're being real, we're probably like, okay. We can throw in the 11th seed. We can talk about the 11th seed as well for a couple, for a bit. But 5 to 11 pretty much is a complete mad show in the Western Conference, right? Starting things off with the Dallas Mavericks, or I guess I'll say the seeds right now. The current fifth seed in the Western Conference is the Dallas Mavericks. Sixth seed Los Angeles Lakers. Seventh seed Portland Trailblazers. Eighth seed Golden State Warriors. Ninth seed Memphis Grizzlies. 10th seed San Antonio Spurs. And 11th seed New Orleans Pelicans. So it's completely crazy right now. There is it's a 7.5 game difference between 5 and 11. But after the seventh seed, the 5 to 7 seed are pretty much, all tied together. Starting out with the current 5 seed, the Dallas Mavericks, as we talked about, Luka Doncic was previously very opposed to it for the reasons that we named earlier in the episode. Pretty much, he said, "What's the point of working all year for that 7th or 8th seed or for that 6th seed when you could just be booted out in 2 games like that? What is the point of working all year for that?" And that's a very valid point that we brought up. So Luka Doncic himself and the owner Mark Cuban have been vocal against the introduction of this playing tournament. And for the Dallas Mavericks, they've had a kind of just a up and down year as well, similar to other teams that we've mentioned. It's been a very inconsistent year for them due to injuries for one, right? Kristaps Porzingis being perpetually injured, a lot of their other players being out, in and out, in and out. And also their defense hasn't been great, so they have not had a great year overall. And this brings me to my point about if the injuries come up right now, or for example in the play-in tournament, which it very well could be because of if you're looking at the roster right now, they have a number of players out again. So if they get booted to the 7th seed, for example, and they have to play in the play-in tournament, and these injuries arise, they've worked all year to be in that playoff position, but they could just be booted out.
yeah. And again, like Dallas is a team that I've invested a lot in time into paying attention to. And obviously, again, you mentioned the inconsistencies, the injuries have obviously has been a problem for them. But again, there's no denying that they are one of the best teams in the Western Conference. And Luca's kind of right in the sense that what is the point of working this, especially in the West? You win more games than the other teams to get the seeding that you are in. That's just how it works. Like tonight the Raptors lost to the Clippers. The Clippers, you know, the Raptors lost, so the Raptors are going to be a lower seed. That's just how it works. If they won that game, they might be able to go up. That's just how it works. So again, if a team like Dallas that got all the way up to the 5th seed still have a chance to maybe slip down to 7 because it's just that tight in the West, and then have to be forced to play in a play-in tournament, it makes no sense for them. Like, I understand where their frustration is coming from, because it's like, why? Like, we worked our way up to, we won more games than the 8th and 9th seeds, the 7th, 8th, and 9th seeds. We should be in the playoffs, but we have to play 2 games to prove why we should be there, even though our play the entire year should have been dictated that.
Exactly. That's pretty much the overarching point we were trying to, argue against the play-in tournament in the beginning of the episode, and this is the prime example of it. Another example of the play-in tournament working against the NBA, because they definitely, I don't think they might want this, but they don't like the outcomes it could bring. And we're talking about the most, I guess, noteworthy or most headline-worthy team who could be impacted by the play-in tournament, the current 6th seed Los Angeles Lakers, who are currently tied with the 5th seed Dallas Mavericks. They're both 10 games behind the 1st seed in the Western Conference, and the Lakers are only 1 game up on the Portland Trailblazers. And with LeBron James and Dennis Schroeder both being out for, nobody knows right now, this could be a very scary proposition for the Los Angeles Lakers of them playing in the play-in tournament. And this is the exact reason why LeBron was very vocal against the play-in tournament, where he talked about whoever made it needs to be fired, right? This is exactly why the Los Angeles Lakers were expected to be a contender. We even named them as our favorite to win the championship this year, but they've just been decimated with injuries this year. Again, similar case to pretty much every other team in the league this year. But the Los Angeles Lakers themselves are being decimated with injuries, right? Players missing games. Anthony Davis missed a number of games with that Achilles injury and that calf injury. LeBron James missed a number of games with that ankle injury. Everyone else has pretty much missed a number of games due to injury. And again, as I said, now with Dennis Schroeder and LeBron both being out for, Dennis Schroeder being out for at least 10 to 14 days, and then LeBron being, questionable pretty much every game, they're, them going from a contending team to a team that arguably, I don't think it'll happen, but, that has a chance to be booted out of the playoff race entirely is not a good prospect. And this pretty much, again, as I said, robs the NBA of a huge revenue stream if the Lakers were by chance to miss the playoffs, because of the fact that, again, LeBron is your biggest selling point as the NBA, and the Los Angeles Lakers are one of the biggest markets in the world. So for a team like the Lakers that has star power, that has contention goals, for them to miss the playoffs will be a backbreaker for the NBA.
Yeah, so I think the Lakers and LeBron particularly saying, what he said about the play-in tournament is kind of the major reason why we're all even talking about the play-in tournament as much as we are. Again, we said at the beginning of the episode, we had concerns when it was first introduced that it was going to be a thing this year. We had concerns, and we kind of talked about over the last few months that, I don't know, this play-in might just be something. But ever since LeBron came out and the possibility got very real that the Lakers couldn't miss the playoffs if they get booted out in the play-in tournament, that's what people started to open up a little, like open their eyes a little bit, being like, oh shit, this play-in might not be that great of an idea, because if a team like Memphis or Golden State, we'll talk about in a bit, that gets hot at the right time, well, the Lakers might be like looking out the window while everyone else goes to play in the playoffs. So it's honestly just one of those things. And again, I think if we had a healthy LeBron James, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I think the Lakers would be in their rightful position in a top 3, top 4 seed in the West. But we are in this position where the Lakers have been dropping games. And again, the Lakers are an old, veteran-heavy team. They have a lot of vets on that team. So again, injuries were going to be a concern. And LeBron is 36 years old. Like, he's not a young player anymore. And I think he even said it himself. He might not be 100% from this injury. He might not ever get 100%, which is honestly pretty possible.
It makes me feel old.
Yeah, it makes us feel old. But again, Father Time is eventually going to catch up. It caught up to every great player. It caught up to Michael. It caught up to Kobe. You know, eventually
Tim
your
Duncan.
Tim Duncan. Eventually, your body is just going to break down. It's not going to be the same. LeBron has had this track record of just being superhuman when it comes to like not getting hurt or just recovering and being better than ever. It might not be the case this time. Like when LeBron was playing against the Raptors, you can visibly see he was not right. Like he was not the same LeBron James that we all know he can be. You know, I was always like when I was watching that game, I was always waiting. I'm like, LeBron's gonna take over now, and it just never happened. And that's the biggest thing where I'm like, yo, this is a little concerning. If the Lakers can't even beat the Raptors, who are honestly not even playing half their team because they're trying to tank,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
it's a
To your
little
point,
concerning.
yeah, to your point about LeBron too, right? Man, I just lost my train of thought. But one more point about the Lakers, right? As an unbiased fan, would you rather see the Memphis Grizzlies in the playoffs or the Los Angeles Lakers? No
Listen, John
disrespect
Morant's
to
nice.
Yeah, John Morant's nice, but no disrespect to Memphis Grizzlies. I don't think anybody wants to see them in the playoffs over the Los Angeles Lakers, except for Memphis Grizzlies fans, right?
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to see that. So it will be a big problem for the NBA if that were potentially to happen, that the Lakers will be booted out just because of injuries. Moving on to the current 7th seed, which is the Portland Trailblazers. Now, the Portland Trailblazers are actually probably the most comfortable team with the play-in tournament, given the fact that they have experience from it last year and they were the winners of the play-in tournament in the Western Conference last year. They also have a very good team on paper. Again, they haven't had the greatest season, but they do have Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, who, given 1 or 2 games, can catch fire and just absolutely decimate the opposing team. So I think the Blazers. I think if there's a team that's fine with the play-in tournament, it's the Portland Trailblazers, who, again, to my point, have also been very bad at times in the last few weeks, especially concerning their defensive issues, which we talked about, for a number of episodes. And these issues could potentially bite them. Now, again, everyone, I think, wants to see the Portland Trailblazers in the playoffs because they are a very exciting product for the NBA. They're definitely a great playoff team to watch. But if they were to be booted out of the playoffs because of the fact that they lost a game or two, again, it's not a good look for the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, again, like Portland has been a team that, you know, you can argue has been could is what is pretty comfortable with the playing format. But I think I need to counter your point in the sense that last season when they did the play-in tournament, they were coming from behind. Like they had to earn their spot to
That is
get to the
true.
playoffs. This time they have to keep their spot. Which and then when you talk about their woes defensively, now for that more hungrier team like the Warriors, Memphis, the Spurs, if they start to be a lot more aggressive, it could be that Portland might get booted out because again, they got to play the 8th seed to first of all maintain their spot as the 7th seed, and the 8th seed's not any cupcake either. Like so, what I'm trying to say is that it's a little different from last year. So yes, although they understand what a play-in tournament's like, it's not the same as last season. But I do agree with your point where they have Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum who could catch fire on any given night. But again, it all depends on how well the team is playing. And then over the last few weeks, they haven't been that great. Although again, they have talent on paper, but the lack of defense and that it could be very concerning for them.
Yeah, moving on to the 8 seeded Warriors, who are arguably, could be the most dangerous team in this scenario, just because of and again, we talked about this last week with the episode we did with Steph Curry. The Golden State Warriors could be a very, very dangerous team for any other playing tournament team, with Steph Curry playing the way that he's playing right now at the level that he's playing at. And if they're able to take out a team like the Lakers, it just further solidifies, Steph Curry's supposed MVP campaign. The Golden State Warriors are a very dangerous team, and we've seen it all over social media where Lakers fans are very worried at the possibility of facing a team like the Golden State Warriors and then potentially losing just because of the fact that Steph Curry's unguardable, right? He's unguardable at this point. So if he just goes crazy, and then we talked about a couple of episodes ago as well, the potential of a guy like Draymond Green playing up to his role in the NBA playoffs, him going crazy in the playoffs. A guy like Andrew Wiggins, who, depending on the night, could be that second option that the Warriors could very well use. So, the Warriors have a real possibility of upsetting a team like the Lakers, like the Blazers in the play-in tournament. And, again, the NBA will make a lot of money off of Steph Curry, but who will they be losing out on in the process is the question.
Man, now that you brought that up, man, I can see that totally as like a passing of a torch kind of thing the NBA wants to have. We're like, oh, here, LeBron's getting older, passing the Steph beats LeBron to pass the torch to as the new face of the league. I can totally see that narrative being played out. But again, like I gotta agree with you. Like again, the Warriors are in such a prime position where if they catch fire, and Steph Curry has been heating up for these last couple of months. He's been playing very well. Um, it's very possible that they could sneak into the playoff. Like the Warriors have a lot of playoff experience between Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson. Obviously, like he's on the bench, but again, he still had that wisdom and that experience on there. And the pedigree of that team is still there. Like they still have that championship, DNA. And I think when it comes down to it, they could be very dangerous. And it's very real that if the Lakers slip to 7, and they got to play the 8th seed, who's the Warriors, man, I can see like that's rating. When you talk about the pros of the playing tournament, that's the pros of the playing tournament. But the thing is, not every 7th or 8th seed has a LeBron James and a Steph Curry on it. Like that's the other point you got to realize. But man, what a narrative that would be. But yeah, it would be crazy to see.
Yeah, like the Warriors are a very dangerous team, I think, in this scenario. And then I guess lumping the last 3 teams who are currently in the play-in tournament race together, I think there's a 1 game difference between the Memphis Grizzlies and the San Antonio Spurs, who are the 9th and 10th seed respectively. And then the New Orleans Pelicans are 2 games behind the Spurs. So they still have a chance to get into it. The Memphis Grizzlies pretty much have been quietly a very solid team throughout the whole season. I think they're looking for revenge after last season when they were booted out in the NBA play-in tournament. And yeah, they've been pretty good for the whole season, especially now with Jaren Jackson Jr. returning. So that, I think, adds another dynamic into this play-in tournament. The San Antonio Spurs, they have Greg Popovich, right? Enough said. It's the San Antonio Spurs. We know what they're capable of doing, what Greg Popovich's staff is capable of doing. And then finally, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, who have been pretty disappointing this season. They've been very disappointing this season, but they still have a shot at it. And when we're talking about the play-in tournament, if we go back to last season, why was the play-in tournament arguably created? For the New Orleans Pelicans, right?
For Zion.
For Zion Williamson, if the New Orleans Pelicans were able to sneak into the play-in tournament and then win out, which they're very capable of doing, they have a very talented roster. If they win out and go to the NBA playoffs, that's literally a prime reason why the NBA created the play-in tournament.
Man, like, oh man, like, see when you say some things like that, where like, oh, they created a play-in tournament to get Zion Williams in the playoffs, it just sounds so believable because it's just how the NBA kind of is. It's very narrative driven, to say the least. Like, I'm not gonna say it's rigged, but I'm also not gonna say that like the NBA doesn't want certain things to happen. Like they if they want something to happen, they're gonna kind of nudge it to be in their favor. But
Hey
yeah,
man, money is money, bro.
money is money for sure. But again, when you're talking about teams like Memphis, again, like it's tough for them. I really like their team. They have a young team. I love John Morant. He's a fantastic player. But man, if they only didn't play in the West, man. If they played in the East, man, they're a guaranteed playoff team, man. A fun team to watch. But man, in the West, it's so hard to see them beating a team like that, like a Lakers or a Blazers or Warriors. Man, it's just tough. And San Antonio again, Pop is a genius, but man, he ain't a miracle worker. So, like, how likely is it? And again, I'm kind of like cooled off on the New Orleans hype train. Like, I just think Zion is a great player, but he's not at the level yet to carry a team to win victories, and I think that's something that he's gonna have to work on. And again, there's some players in the Pelicans who I feel should have stepped up and didn't. We're talking about guys like Lonzo Ball, who we've talked about a
Well, I
lot
mean, Lonzo's been pretty good, honestly.
since he came back. But again, where was that for the whole season? So I don't know. We've talked about things about like this like in previous episodes, but in terms of these three teams, it is what it is. They do have a shot, but it's just not as great or not as impactful as what you'd see with the other teams we've talked about in the Western Conference. But yeah, that was the landscape of the play-in tournament for the Western Conference. Definitely let us know what you guys think for the Western and the Eastern Conference. Definitely let us know. What do you think about the play-in tournament? Do you like it? Do you don't like it? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Let us know what you guys think on the comment section on YouTube or on social media. But finally, to end off this episode, we wanted to jump into the up and under segment for this week. So first off, are you up or under on Indiana Pacers head coach Nate Bjorkgren facing an uncertain future after, certain relationship difficulties with players and staff have kind of come to life?
I mean, I don't want to say, I don't know how to break this down, to be honest. Like, I'm under on obviously, the issues that they have, but if it's really that bad, I'm up on the Indiana Pacers kind of letting him go, unfortunately. Like Nate Bjorkgren was our guy, obviously coming from the Raptors staff, coming
Listen,
from the
Chris
Knicks.
Finch left.
Yeah,
There's a spot open.
exactly.
Come back.
I mean, shout out Chris Finch, bro. He's been doing a lot better than Ryan Saunders was. Nate Bjorkgren was our guy. He came from the Nick Nurse coaching tree, which, again, Nick Nurse already has a coaching tree, right? It's a thing. So Nate Bjorkgren, we thought he would be able to, push that franchise forward to that next step. Obviously, injuries happened. The Victor Oladipo situation happened. And it's just not been a great season for them. I wasn't aware of any underlying issues with Nate Bjorkgren and the players, and as well with the staff, right? If the players say one thing, it's it's a lot more common for players to be mad at the coach or whatever. But for the coach to have issues with the staff, that's that's a pretty big issue as well. So I mean, me being a Raptors fan, not paying too much attention to Indiana Pacers, like, this is kind of news to me. But I don't know, man. Like, Indiana fans, tell us what you think. Like, do you guys think Nate Bjorkgren should stick around?
I mean, take it in. Like, we never really heard any of this stuff from, like the beginning or midway point of the season. The Pacers were doing very well for a team with a first-time head coach. They were doing pretty well, and I think now when they went on that losing skid and just started plummeting in the standings, I think that's kind of where this stuff kind of came to light. So again, we don't really know how true this all is or how believable it is, but it is kind of concerning to see that. And again, hey, if Nate Bjorkgren, if things don't work out in Indiana, you always got your spot right here next to Nick Nurse. And hopefully Nick will get you another job.
Yeah, pretty much, man. Next up, are you up or under on Steve Kerr saying the modern game lacks a lot of fundamentals? For example, one of the things he touched upon was the fact that nobody really boxes out in today's NBA.
Yeah, I'm hella up on this. Thank you, Steve Kerr, for relaying my sentiments I've been saying for the last few years now. Thanks, Steph Curry, for ruining basketball. Because
I can't blame Steph Curry for it. He's good at what he does, but
he's good at what he does. But his influence on the next generation, to me, is just so frustrating. Because it's like, and again, it could just be because that's not the way I was taught growing up, or you were taught growing up. We were taught the fundamentals. You gotta box out on rebounds. You gotta learn how to work your way into the post. You gotta understand that you gotta move the ball around a bit. And you gotta get inside. Those were all the things that we were taught growing up, and now it's just none of that's happening. Kids today will want to do these crazy dribbles and just shoot a 100-footer or something, and
stupid half court shots, bro.
Stupid half court shots for warm ups, which is no one does layup lines anymore.
That's facts, bro.
Anyone see a 3-man weaver and something it's the fundamentals that we grew up on that is still so effective in basketball have just they just gone away from it. And as much as you can say that the game is adapting and evolving, I think it's regressing in a way, because again, if nobody's boxing out, nobody's grabbing rebounds. But again, you can also see why no one's boxing out, because if someone's shooting a 3, you're not going to get a rebound right in front of the basket. It's most likely going to be a long rebound. So I don't know, man. It's
shout out to the Raptors for stinking at that for the whole season.
Hey, man. Hopefully the draft pick's good, but it's just one of those things, man. Like that I can't like. I don't know where to be on. Like I'm in the middle. Like I like progression in the sport, but at the same time, I don't want to lose out on what made the sport so great.
Yeah, for me, number one, I'm not gonna blame Steph Curry for it because he still carries the fundamentals in his game. If you watch his game is it's just he's really good at.
Yeah,
The
that's just me
problem is
clowning
when
him.
the problem is when people who don't understand basketball and don't understand how many skills Steph Curry has and just focus on the fact that he can shoot half court bombs and they think that they'll be able to do that and work on nothing else. That's where my issue lies, right? Where I'm refing a kid's game and they're burping up half court shots like out the gate. It's like, bro, like, dude, get a layup, man. Um, but I will, I on this podcast, I've been a proponent for the modern game. I've defended it a lot of times, especially against like old heads thing, kind of not intelligent things. But in this case, I will actually agree with Steve Kerr in the sense that the modern game does lack a lot of fundamentals. When we're talking about, for example, players don't take open pull-up mid-range jumpers anymore. Like, bro, you're
Yeah, they
wide
don't.
open. These guys want to take a contested three. I know the efficiency says, oh, take a three or whatever if you're a 36% shooter from three. But bro, you have an open shot, and this is why again, I've talked about this numerous times. This is why mid-range players who can shoot mid-range jumpers in the playoffs go crazy. They succeed because of the fact that nobody else can apparently at this rate shoot mid-range jumpers anymore. Right? There's only a few players that can do that.
But also, players aren't
So
even defending that anymore because everyone's focusing on the three. So if you get past the first
exactly,
defender through a screen, the defender is backing up because they think you're gonna go right to the rim. You just stop and pull it up. It's also an
exactly.
easier shot to take, honestly.
Yeah, that's I agree with that. And then I never consciously thought about it until I saw this quote from Steve Kerr, but he's very right, bro. I don't see anybody boxing out. Honestly,
Exactly.
there's very few players that I can name off the top of my head that I know for a fact actually box out and try to grab every single rebound. Players don't really do that. And now, to your point, a lot of it is because of the fact that there's a lot more 3 point shots now. So players aren't gonna box out if the rebound's coming out all the way to the 3 point line. It kind of makes sense, but at the same time, that kind of ruins the fundamentals of when there is short rebounds to be had. Players aren't boxing out, which is why you see a lot of offensive rebounds, a lot of guards grabbing offensive rebounds. That should not happen with big men being around the paint. So I will actually agree with Steve Kerr on this one.
Yeah. So moving on, are you up or under on Carmelo Anthony actually moving into the top 10 on all time in scoring in his most recent game?
I'm up on him, man. Shout out Carmelo Anthony.
Hall of Famer.
He's one of the great scorers I've ever watched, and the fact that he's now in the top 10 in scoring, which I mean, I never really thought he would. I guess I didn't really think that he was this close, but he's in the top 10 in scoring now, and shout out to Melo because pretty much as he was saying, like he was out of the league at one point before last season. So for him to now be back in the league and now crack the top 10 in scoring, that's pretty amazing, man. Shout out Melo.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out Melo.
Next up, are you up or under on the Cleveland Cavaliers signing Anderson Varejao, uh, the Afro Anderson Varejao for the rest of the season?
Yo, I'm hella up on it. Yo, shout out Anderson Varejao, yo. This man
Facts.
played his heart out for Cleveland. He got screwed over by Cleveland when they won the champ. Got screwed over by Golden State when he signed there. Didn't get a ring there. But he's back on the Cavs, and you know, I guess shout out to him for getting back into the league, man. But for real though, he got screwed twice out of a ring, which is
Pretty much.
that's
Yeah,
sad, man.
that's pretty crazy, honestly.
That's
Yeah, shout out Anderson Varejao, man. Like definitely one of the most, I guess, iconic players of his era,
yo, man.
right? And
He was
I
one of
mean, he's been
LeBron's
balling.
favorite players.
Exactly, right? If you look at any LeBron highlights in his first stint in Cleveland, Anderson Varejao in like every single highlight, bro. He's in the frame, right? You can just see his hair going everywhere. So shout out Anderson Varejao. He's been a good player overseas as well, for at least for Brazil in the international scene. So he's still got game for sure. And him being a veteran presence for the young Cleveland Cavaliers, I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, are you up or under on Freddie Gillespie? Shout out Freddie G, signing a 2-year deal with the Toronto Raptors.
I'm up on it, bro. We needed some centers, yo. Like Kem Birch and Freddie Gillespie have completely turned the outlook of this team around, bro. They've completely turned around. Now we're still gonna miss the playoffs, but fade for Cade. But again, Freddie Gillespie has given us another player now for next season that we can potentially look at developing, whereas we had Aaron Baines on the roster.
I mean, Freddie Gillespie's had potential. Like, he's shown a lot in his limited time with the Raptors, man. Like, this guy's come in. He's brought energy. He's brought a presence. Even in tonight's game against the Clippers, man, he was going right at DeMarcus Cousins, man. DeMarcus, you already know, like, that's a big another dude you don't want to piss off. And Freddie Gillespie, he went in. Like, there was this possession where he got the board. Like, DeMarcus Cousins is hounding right into him. Freddie pushed him right out of the way and just dunked it with his left hand. Like, that was pretty impressive to see a guy do that. And he's definitely still raw. He's definitely needs some development. But I think if the Raptors development system has done anything, they've developed a lot of great players.
Yeah, man. Like, and he doesn't even seem like the most athletic guy, but he has sneaky athleticism, and his mobility too, in terms of him being able to rotate on the defensive end, get a number of blocks, dunk the ball around the rim. So, shout out Freddie G, man. Gilly, he's been really good for the Toronto Raptors. I think everyone's already a big fan of his.
Hell of a dancer.
Yeah, exactly. Hell of a dancer, bro. So shout out Freddie Gillespie. And finally, are you up or under on the fact that Kevin Love apologized for his on-court outburst against the Toronto Raptors? Now, apparently, the Cavs are just turning the page on the incident, but Kevin Love did publicly apologize to his teammates, to his staff, and he even talked about it the next day in a media conference where, I don't know, like, there's a number of reasons he said he gave, but he pretty much tried to apologize for the whole incident. And talk about how much he loves his teammates, and the Cavs are just turning the page on it. So are you up or under on this whole situation?
Bro, I'm under on it. Like, yo, you just threw the ball away, like, out of frustration. Like, yo, somebody get Kevin Love the hell out of Cleveland, because, or somebody drug test him, because every time he talks to people, he talks about, oh, Cleveland, yo, I love Cleveland, I rep Cleveland. But yo, this man wants to leave, man. This man wants to go to a contender or something like that, man. But again, why'd you sign a 4-year, $120 million extension then to keep yourself stuck there?
Yeah, like, that's my point, right? Kevin Love, like, he gave a lot of valid reasons, like, in terms of, like, he talked about, obviously, like, his mental health and whatnot. Like, I'm cool with that, man. Like, no problem. You do you. But there is a argument about the precedent that he set him and, for example, another guy like Blake Griffin, right? Who are kind of dogging it for their teams, even though, I guess not in Blake Griffin's situation because he didn't sign a contract with the Detroit Pistons. But in Kevin Love's situation, man, he signed a contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers, bro. He got a bunch of money. And, you can say money doesn't make you happy, but, that's fine. But you have to maintain a certain level of professionalism. And again, this isn't the first time Kevin Love has had a situation like this. We saw last year when he was, like, throwing the ball at his teammates on the court. This is a precedent that Kevin Love has set for himself, and it does not bode well for the NBA and for the argument that we've been having over the past number of seasons of, is there too much player empowerment in the NBA, right? For example, again, me comparing this situation to a guy like Blake Griffin, who kind of dogged it for his team, didn't dunk for like 2 years, and now in Brooklyn he's doing putbacks, right? So there's a argument to be had, and there has to be like a balance. But again, it's not a great look for the NBA. It's not a great look for Kevin Love. And again, this is another topic that, like, we talked about numerous times. It's gonna keep going on and on. But yeah, like, I don't think it's a great situation overall, to be honest.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, YouTube, basically wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the Up and Under Podcast. Also, check us out on social media, Twitter and Instagram at UP_Podcast, Facebook.com/Up and Under Podcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news as they occur. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. And lastly, check out our website, UpandUnderPodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we put blog posts about every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen to the full thing, you can read about it on our website. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. And yeah, man, playing tournaments coming up in a couple of weeks, man. This season's done, bro. Like, Shit's crazy, man.
Time flies, bro. Time flies, man.
Bro, it's crazy, man. It felt like it was the beginning of the season, like a day ago, and now it's like oh, here's
Yeah.
playoffs, yo.
Honest, bro.
But yo,
Honest.
playoff
Crazy.
ball's coming in, man. Although our team isn't gonna be in there, but yo, there's gonna be some exciting shit.
This is the most stress-free playoffs I've had in 8 years, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, with that concludes this week's episode. We'll see you guys all in the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.